Hi, this is Dr. Liza Sahido from Psyche Electro-Acoustic Opera Company, and you're watching episode 3 of Building a Standalone Podcasting App in Max 8. So in today's episode, we're finally building a sound file clip launcher for your opening music, bumper music, and sound effects. We're creating a cough button, and we're going to apply fun effects to your voice and triggers for those effects. One add-on that we're going to apply to your voice is compression. Of all the elements of your podcast, your voice is the most dynamic sound source. So, in order to mix your voice properly with the other elements of your podcast, we need to control its peaks so that your audience has a pleasant listening experience. All right, so let's begin. We're going to start by building your sound file clip launcher. Now, I don't know how many sound files you're going to need for your podcast. For sure, you're going to need at least 2, your opening music and your bumper music. But we're going to create 10 so as to give you room for some sound effects and messages from sponsors. We're going to use the number keys on top of the letter keys on your keyboard as triggers for these sound clips. Okay, so let's bring in the heart of this module. Let's unlock the patch. Let's find an empty space in my patch, a space that's not going to show up in my screen capture area. And we're going to bring in a blank object and we're going to type in the word playlist tilde. This is the object that's going to store our sound files. All we need to do to bring sound files into playlist tilde is lock our patch and just drag them in. Now, if you don't have any sound files to work with right now, you can go to the Max menu on the left side of your Max window, hover over the audio icon, click on it, and then you have access to a ton of free samples here in Max. So I'm going to drag in 10 samples. If you want to reorder these sound files, all you have to do is grab the sound file from the handle that's available on the side of each clip and just order your sound files by dragging them into place. All right, that's it. Now you see that all of these sound clips have play buttons on them. Now we could simply just launch the clips by using our mouse and clicking on the sound files, but of course that is not very practical when you're in screen capture mode. Again, we want to be able to do everything in this mode and not ever have to see our controls when we're podcasting. So we're going to use triggers from our computer keyboard to launch these samples, just as we use spacebar to turn our recording on and off. We're going to use numbers on our computer keyboard to launch these clips. Okay, if we want to hear what the audience is getting, as we're recording, we're going to need a digital to analog converter. It's going to need a toggle, just like our ADC tilde, but instead of giving it its own toggle, we'll just use the toggle from our ADC tilde. We want both of these guys to be on at the same time. Right now, our mixer is sending our audio output into jit.vcr. We also want to set the left-right audio output to our DAC tilde. Okay, now we're going to set up the left-right audio output from our playlist tilde with our mixer. So this first patch cable goes into to left, and then the second patch cable goes into to right. And now when I lock my patch, I should be able to hear my clips. Okay. They're a bit loud, so I'm going to lower the volume on these clips. So before we set up our keyboard triggers, we got to send playlist tilde commands that allow us to tell it what clips to turn on. Okay, so to send an object commands, we need messages. And we're going to send this playlist tilde messages that are integers from 1 to 10. and they correspond to launch clip 1, launch clip 2, launch clip 3, and so forth. So we have our messages set up, our commands set up. Now we need triggers for those messages. We need something to send these messages a bang so that we can use our computer keyboard to launch those clips. Now we already have a key object set up because we're using the spacebar to turn our jit.vcr recording on and off. So what we're going to do is add numbers to this select objects list. And so we need to find out what numbers correspond to the keys that I want to use on my computer keyboard. I want to use keys 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 as our clip launcher triggers. So let's see what numbers correspond to what triggers. And then once we find out what numbers correspond to what triggers, we're going to enter those numbers into the select object list. Okay, so key number 1 corresponds to number 49. 2 is 50. 3 is 51. 4 is 52. 5 is 53. 6 is 54. 7 is 55. 8 is 56. 9 is 57. And 0 is 48. All right, now let's enter those numbers into the select object list. 49, 50. Make sure that there are spaces between the entries in your list. 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, and 48. I'm leaving them in the order as they appear on my computer keyboard. So trigger 49, which corresponds to the second outlet here on my select object, is going to trigger sound clip 1. So that means the number 1 on my computer keyboard is going to launch sound clip number 1. And this could be your opening music. Trigger 50, which corresponds to key number 2 on my computer keyboard, can turn on my second sound file, and so forth. Make sure that you do not use the last output of your select object. Okay, I'm going to lock my patch. And now I'm going to press the keys on my computer keyboard to launch these clips. All right, clip number 1, key number 1. Clip number 2, key number 2. Clip number 3, key number 3. Clip number 4, key number 4. Clip number 10, 0 on my computer keyboard. And there you have it, guys. We are now able to launch clips for our podcast. In the process of making this tutorial, I ran into a serious problem. I've recorded this tutorial about 3 times already, and with the setup you guys currently have, you can only make recordings that are about 4 minutes long. Not good for podcasting. Turns out that you have to increase the default cache size of your jit.vcr. And so I'm going to scrub down to where that object is in my patch and show you how I increased the cache size for my jit.vcr recording. So I added another attree object. It's red because I wanted to highlight it. I highlighted it, by the way, by going to the inspector and changing its color attributes. But this is just a regular old attree object. Click on its pull down menu and select cache size. You'll see that next to the word cache size, it says gigabyte. You will be pretty safe if you apply a 1 gigabyte setting to your cache size. A 1 gig cache size should give you a show of about an hour in length. We can set this cache size to be automatically 1 gig with a message and with our load bang. So let's do that now. We're going to unlock the patch. Let's set it to 0 to make sure that it changes. Let's bring in a message. 1 point. Let's lock our patch and make sure that it can load up. Okay, it does. So we're going to connect this one message to our load bang. Okay, so now when the patch launches, the cache size automatically set to 1 gig. Okay, so we're now ready to set up our cough button for our podcasting app. Why is this little feature important? Well, you definitely don't want to surprise your audience with a loud cough or a loud laugh. Firstly, this could physically hurt your listener if their volume is set loud enough, and it could just generally make your podcast uncomfortable to listen to. So we want the listener to have a pleasant listening experience throughout. So without any further ado, let's set up our cough button. So let's scrub down to an area of my patch that will not appear in my recording area. And we're going to use the space over here to set up our cough button module. You're going to need a gain tilde object. That's the audio level fader in Mac. Something that you should know about this object: it maxes out at 157 steps. You definitely don't want to max out on this object. Unity gain for gain tilde is 128. So we definitely want it to max out at 128. All right, so we're going to give it a message, 128, and we're going to give it a message, 0. This 0 message is what's going to act as our mute button. Now, as with everything else, we don't want to have to be clicking on these messages for our cough button to work. We want to select an unused key on our computer keyboard to act as our cough button. Your space bar is already being used as your record on and off switch. Numbers 1 through 0 on your computer keyboard are being used to launch samples. I'm going to use the tilde key on my computer keyboard as my cough button. When I press down on the tilde key, it will mute this gain tilde. And when I lift my finger from the tilde key, it will restore my gain tilde to unity gain. Okay, so before we set things up with our tilde key, we want to make sure that this gain tilde is set to unity gain upon the loading of this patch. So how do we do that? Well, we need our old friend load bang to do that for us. So I'm going to connect message 128 with load bang. Okay. Now we're ready to set up our tilde key. We're going to need a select object with the number 96 in it. Again, the number 96 corresponds to the tilde key on our computer keyboard. I'm going to connect the output from the number box that's connected to my key object to select 96, and the output of select 96 will send a bang to the 0 message. Now we need another type of key object, a key up object. Key up reports when a key has been lifted. And so we're going to connect it with a number box and connect it to another select 96 object. All right. So when I lift my finger from the tilde key, it will send a bang to 128, restoring my mic up to unity gain. All right, let's test this thing. Key down, key up, key down, key up. Now, no muting is happening at this point because we do not have our microphone output set up with this gain tilde. So what I'm going to do is go up to my ADC tilde, unlock the patch, and disconnect. Oh, it seems like I already did it. I'm going to disconnect my ADC tilde from my mixer, and I'm going to instead connect it to my gain tilde. By the way, this gain tilde is going to be the ultimate output for all of my vocal modules. And I'm going to connect the output of my gain tilde to mixer channel 1 left and mixer channel 1 right. Okay, now I have a working cough button. In building this cough button module, you'll see that there is now a nasty patch cable going through my recording area. So what I'm going to do is highlight that patch cable, go to the object menu and click hide on lock. When I lock my patch, oh, it's gone. Okay, so we're going to add a module to this patch that will allow you to switch between vocal effects for your podcast. Let's bring in an object called selector tilde. Selector tilde is an audio switcher. We're going to give it the argument 3 because we want to switch between 3 Vox effects. And as you can see, with the argument of 3, we get 4 inputs. So the first inlet receives messages that helps us route what's coming in through these other inlets. Now, in order for our cough button to continue to work, even after we've brought in our vocal effects modules and are routing our vocal effects through selector, we have to set up our selector with our gain tilde. Remember that gain tilde is the ultimate output for our voice. So what I'm going to do is disconnect ADC tilde from gain tilde. And I'm going to have the outlet of selector tilde feed into gain tilde. Now let's set up the messages that go with selector tilde. 1 is for unprocessed voice, 2 is for effect number 1, and 3 is for effect number 2. Now, when I say unprocessed voice, that's not entirely true because I'm going to set up my microphone with a Mac parametric equalizer and compressor. Okay, now that our selector is all set up and ready to switch between our regular voice and 2 vocal effects, we need to choose 3 keys in our computer keyboard that will help us switch between these effects. I'm going to bring in another select object and I'm going to choose letters Q, W, and E on my computer keyboard to switch between my vocal settings. Let's see what numbers correspond to those letters. Let's take a look at the key object here up in the corner. Q corresponds to number 113, W 119, and E 101. So let's type in those numbers into our new select object, 113, space 119, and space 101. Go from the outlet of our number box that's connected to our key object into the first inlet of select. Okay, now we're going to connect the first 3 outlets of select to our messages. 113 will go to 1, 119 will go to 2, and 101 will go to 3. Now we can use Q, W, and E on our computer keyboards to switch between vocal settings. Now that we have our selector all set up, we are finally going to bring in a compression plugin into this podcasting app. Why do we need that? Well, it is common practice to apply compression to voiceovers and broadcasted voice for the following reasons. Compression helps to reduce the dynamic range of your voice. And by the way, the human voice is one of the most dynamic instruments. So reducing the dynamic range of your voice is important because it allows you to properly mix it with other sonic elements in your podcast. Dynamic range reduction also helps to keep your voice at a consistent level, which makes your podcast easier to listen to. Compression can also add presence and depth to your voice. Now, our compressor is not going to work alone. Compression is often paired up with equalization. We are also going to use a parametric equalizer in Max to do the following. We're going to apply a low frequency roll-off filter to your mic's output. Why do we need that? Well, the microphone you're using is probably a directional microphone. If your mic exhibits a cardioid, supercardioid, or a hypercardioid pickup pattern, then it is a directional microphone. Directional microphones can produce proximity effect, which is a bass boost that occurs when a sound source is less than a foot away from a directional mic. Proximity effect is great for some voices. Voices like mine need warming up, and proximity effect can do that. However, proximity effect can also be problematic, especially when recording voices. Why? Because unlike other musical instruments, the voice produces plosives. Plosives are boosted with proximity effect and can create loud pops and can make your voice very uncomfortable to listen to. However, we can reduce those pops by creating a low frequency roll off in our parametric EQ in Max. We're also going to do another thing with Max's parametric EQ. We're going to use Max's parametric EQ to build in presence peaks. Okay, one more thing to think about before we set up our compressor module in Max. We can't enhance our sound with EQ and compression unless we start with a relatively clean sound. Make sure that you are using a mic that effectively isolates you from your environment. I'm using a short shotgun mic, which has extreme rejection to off-axis sounds. I love short shotgun mics for podcasting, but you can also use a broadcast dynamic or simply place any mic behind gobos. It also helps to record in a quiet environment. Okay, we're ready to set up our compression module by setting up our parametric EQ plugin first. All right, so I'm going to scrub to the empty area in my patch, unlock, and I'm going to navigate to the plugins icon on the left side of my screen. Click on it, type in the word Max, and we are looking for the Max EQ parametric plugin, and there it is. I'm going to highlight it and drag it into my patch. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to send the output of my ADC tilde into Max EQ parametric 4. Okay, so I'm going from ADC tilde to my Max parametric EQ. I'm going to highlight this patch cable and go to my object menu and click hide unlock. We're going to connect the output of this parametric EQ to the compressor. But before we do that, let's set up our low frequency roll off and presence peaks in our Max EQ parametric 4. So first, lock your patch, go to the first filter, and click high pass. For some people, a gradual decline after 100 hertz will be enough to avoid pops, but I've needed a little more in recent times, so I'm going to set it to around 150. Let's see if I can type it in. Yes. All right. So my roll off begins at 150 hertz, and for me, that setting has worked great in the past. Okay, now we're going to go to the second filter of our parametric EQ and click on peaking. This is our bell curve setting. Presence peaks on vocal dynamics are wide bell curves with a center frequency of around 600 to 700 hertz. So what I'm going to do is set my center frequency to 700 hertz and boost the gain on the bell curve just a little tiny bit, and that'll give one's voice a little more presence. You can play around with the center frequency to see what works best for your voice. Now we can set up our compressor. We're going to go back to the plugins menu. We're going to type in Max, and we're going to select Max Compressor from our menu. We're going to take the output of our Max EQ parametric and feed it into the Max compressor. I'm going to show you what compressor settings I use to get the best and cleanest sound out of this plugin. These settings may not work for you. You may want to play around with these settings before you commit to them. Now, if you're recording in a place that is noisy, you don't want to use this particular compressor at all. You will hear pumping of the noise due to the expansion device that is included in this compressor plugin. This expansion device is cool because it'll help clean out any small superfluous noise that may happen to be picked up by your microphone, but you definitely want to be in a relatively noise-free area for one, your compression to sound good, and two, so as not to hear any pumping of the noise by the expander here in Max. So again, if you're recording in a noisy area, what I suggest that you do until you can move your setup to a quiet area is bypass the compressor in Max by clicking on this on-off switch. Okay, I'm going to turn on my Max compressor and I'm going to make the following changes. I'm going to change this variation setting to vocals. I'm going to leave my compression settings alone. I'm going to turn off my automatic gain control because I want consistent input gain throughout my podcast. I don't want Max to be tweaking my input gain for me. Now, these expansion settings have worked for me and I haven't had to tweak them. The only thing that I've had to tweak for these expansion settings to work perfectly is to lower the input gain on my mic and bring myself closer to the microphone. Now that I have my compressor set up, I'm going to connect its output to the second inlet of selector. And when I click Q on my computer keyboard, the output of my compressor is being routed to the mixer. So in the course of your podcast, you might want to add some fun effects like reverb for that monster truck commercial sound. So let's do that. All right, so we're going to navigate to our Beep plugin menu and type in the word reverb. I'm going to use the Reverb 2 module, or the Reverb 2 plugin, excuse me. And I'm going to connect the Reverb plugin to my ADC tilde. So we go out ADC tilde into my Reverb module. Now that patch cable may come out in my recording area, so I'm going to hide on lock. Okay. I'm going to connect the outlet of my Reverb plugin to the third inlet of my selector tilde. And I'm going to tweak my reverb so that I get kind of a monster truck kind of sound. And all right, cool. Now when I press the W button on my keyboard, it will switch to reverb. The last effect I want to add is ring modulation. That's one of my favorite vocal effects, by the way. I'm going to unlock my patch and I'm going to bring in a signal multiplier. That's star tilde. I'm going to drag a patch cable from my ADC tilde and connect it to the first inlet of star tilde. Now I'm going to bring in a cycle tilde object. This produces sine tones. And I'm going to give it the frequency of 100 hertz. Ring modulation works a lot like LFO. You're multiplying a carrier signal with another signal. For LFO, your frequency has to be below the hearing range. When you change your LFO frequency to something that's in the hearing range, then you get ring modulation. All right. And I'm going to connect the output of my star tilde to the last inlet of selector 3. And when I click on E on my computer keyboard, you'll hear a robot voice. Okay. So let me demonstrate. Okay, so now I'm going to demo my Vox features. Here's cough switch, cough, 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 cough. Great. Now I'm going to press W for reverb. Monster truck commercial reverb. And now I'm going to press E for ring modulation, which gives me a robot voice sound. He. All right, now I'm going to take us back to our regular voice, which is passing through Max's parametric EQ and compressor. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. In the next and final tutorial, I will show you how to create a user-friendly control panel for your podcasting app. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode.